If you want your character or mesh to move and bend, the best way to do this is an armature modifier with vertex group weights. This is how you tell the software which bone or bones you want each vertex to follow along with at what percentage or weight. To be able to do this successfully, you will need to know about weight painting, which is also called skinning or binding. As I mentioned in a previous video, there's actually a few things you need to get the armature modifier to actually bend your mesh. First of all, you need an armature, that's pretty obvious, and you need your mesh. Now this actually needs the armature modifier attached to it, and this is connected to this armature here. And it's either going to bind with the vertex groups, or the bone envelopes, or both if you wish. Now, if you use the bone envelopes, you actually don't need any vertex groups at all. Here I've got one set up already, and this mesh doesn't have any vertex groups. It's just using those envelope weights, as you can see here, to deform our mesh. But in my opinion, this is not a very good way to go about it, as you'll never get the required result. You're better off to actually use the vertex groups here. Let's have a look in the data tab. Now, if the vertex groups is enabled on an armature modifier, it's going to look for the vertex groups with the same name as our bones. Now, our bones also need to have the deformation enabled, which is always on by default when you create them. Now, I've already weight painted this mesh, so you can see it's bending quite nicely. That's based on the vertex group weights. Now, don't worry, I'll show you how to do this in a moment. But first, we need to look at a few more things about vertex groups. Now, you can add or remove selected vertex groups up here with these buttons. And here in the vertex specials menu, you have a lot of different operations. I'll let you go through them on your own, as they're all pretty self-explanatory. And these buttons here will move the selected group up or down in the stack. You can lock the groups with these padlocks here. And as I mentioned a moment ago, there's a whole bunch of other operations that you can do here. Let's jump into edit mode. And I want to show you a few things about vertex groups. When you have an active vert, in the item tab up here, you get to see all the information about that specific vertex. Now you can have more than one selected, but it's always going to show you the information for the active vert, which is the one that is highlighted in white here. You can see that there's 3 tabs here. This tab here will show you all of the groups. You can see that this vert is a member of bone group 02 and 03. You can change this to only show you the groups that are set to deform. And this tab here is called the other, which means it's a group that is used for something other than deformation. Here I have a group called particle group, and imagine this is a vertex group that I want to use for emitting particles. So let me just assign those selected verts to that group. I'll explain more about that in a moment. Now, because this vertex group name doesn't match any of the names of our bones that have the deformation option enabled, it's going to show up in this other tab. It's not here in the deform tab, but it is in the all tab. This active vert is a member of bone 2, bone 3, and particle group, and these are the corresponding weights. Now this normalize button will normalize all of the displayed weights here, which means it will average them out so they all total 1. So if I click that, it's actually averaged them all out there. Although you probably never want to average out a non-deforming group like this, because you will change the weights of all those groups. That will ruin your deformation weights and ruin your particle weights. So let me just undo that and switch to just display the deformed groups only and try that again. Now this actually worked, but it didn't change anything because those weights were already normalized. They already added up to 1. However, if I jump over to the All tab, you can see that that operation did not change the weights of our particle group here. Now there's more to explain about normalizing, but I'll do that in a moment. Now I'd like to give you a proper explanation of how to actually assign weights. Now there are 3 ways to assign weights. We can do it automatically, we can do it in edit mode and use the vertex group tab or the panel, and we can also use the weight paint tools. First, let's look at the automatic way. There's actually 2 ways that we can apply our automatic weights. We can use the envelopes, or we can just use Blender's internal algorithm that tries to do its best to calculate what the weights should be based on the surrounding bones and the flow of the geometry. So I know you've already seen this, but let's just quickly set up another one. So I'm going to select my mesh, then select my object, and choose Control P. So these are the 2 options that I'm talking about here. So with automatic weights, it's going to use that algorithm. And with envelope weights, it's going to turn the envelopes into a vertex group. But let me choose this one here. And there's a little bit of a problem because my armature isn't at 0, 0, 0. But let me just clear the parent inverse and fix that. So I've already gone ahead and added some animation to both our armatures here. And you can see that the automatic weights has done a pretty horrible job. If I jump into weight paint mode, you can see, I will make sure that I have lock object modes turned off. And then I jump into pose mode for my armature, then shift select my mesh, and then I can actually just select the bones and it will show me the weights for that particular bone group. Let's go here, have a look. We can do the same thing over here. So it hasn't done a very good job at all. And you'll find some particular shapes do a better job than others. Frankly, I would have expected it to do a better job on this one, but it didn't. Now, before I move on, not many people know that you can actually do the same thing on a bone per bone basis. You don't actually have to do it across every bone at once. So I have this bone selected here. And then if I go up to the weights here, I have those options here. I've got the automatic from bones and I have assign from bone envelopes. I can actually overwrite the weights for the groups that I have there. So I've just clicked that. It's going to give me the same option because obviously that's the operation that I already ran. But I can do bone envelopes for this one and you can see that it's updated on that particular bone. The other ones haven't. So let's just do that one and let's do that one. So now you can see that it has updated on a bone per bone basis. So the important thing I want to explain there is you don't have to do it all at once. You can do one bone individually and you can choose whatever mode that you want. Let's have a look at this one over here. I'm going to select my mesh, select this one. Actually, before we do that, I'll show you in edit mode. These are the envelopes that it's going to use. And mesh here does not have any vert groups. And now I'm just going to run that whole operation. So select my mesh, select my armature, and then go Control P and choose envelope weights. And what that will do is turn those envelope weights into a vertex group. So let's just check this out. We'll go over here. You can see I have 3 vertex groups. And just to double check, you can see our armature modifier is set to bone groups and not bone envelopes. But when we do this, you can see that this is a better starting point. And why do these look exactly the same? And that is because I changed these ones manually to use the envelope weights. Now, sometimes the automatic weighting can totally fail. You get a warning that says fail to find solution for one or more bones. Now, this usually happens because the verts are too close together in world space and there's too many bones for it to figure out a solution. So there's actually 2 ways to fix that. Now, I used to do it the long way by assigning the weights one at a time and then manually fixing any issues. But I've recently found out that you can just scale the armature up. So you make it really big in world space, run the operation again, it will work, and then you reset the scale back to 1. So thank you to Demeter from the Blender Animation Studio for that handy tip, as it saved me a bunch of time. So if you run into this issue as well, make sure you do it the fast way and don't be a fool like me and do each bone one by one. Another way of assigning weights is actually using the vertex group panel over here. At the moment, I don't have any groups, so I'm just going to quickly go and parent it to my armature here. And then choose armature to form with empty groups. So if I play my animation, it's not going to follow along because there are no vertices assigned to this group. So we can jump into edit mode and then choose whatever group that we want to assign it to. Then I'm going to select these ones here, and then I can assign the weight here to be whatever I want. 0 is obviously 0 weight, but it will be part of that group. And 1 will be, it's 100% going to follow that bone. So I'm going to select those and then choose assign. So now if I jump into weight paint mode, I can actually see those weights. Red means 1, blue means 0 or not part of any group. I'll speak more about those colors in a minute or so, but for now, let's weight the next bone. I'm going to select these guys here. Oh, make sure I deselect everything first. Select these. And then assign, deselect everything, select these ones, and then assign. So let's have a look in weight paint now. You can see these groups have now all been weighted. Let's have a look at our animation. That's not so bad. Now, when we assign them this way, we can actually assign it to be whatever weight that we want. So let's select these and assign a weight of 0.5. Assign. We can also remove a group. So say, let's just select everything and say, I don't want these verts to be a member of bone 3. So I can click remove. So now you'll see that bone group number 3 is empty. And that would be how you assign weights using the vertex group tab. And the other way of assigning weights is actually using the weight painting tools. So this is just the overview video. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview, obviously, of how it all works. And then in the next video, we'll go through all those tools and how to effectively paint the weights of your mesh. First of all, let's have a look here. For my demonstration, I only have 2 groups, but as you know, we've got 3 bones over there, and I'll show you how to add the extra vert group by painting it. And this already has the armature modifier attached to it. If we jump into weight paint mode, we cannot select our bones here. Let me show you how to do that. If we select our armature, go over to pose mode, and then make sure that we disable this lock object modes up here. So now when we select our mesh, we don't need to shift select it or anything. We can just select our mesh, and that's going to leave our armature technically in pose mode. So when we jump back into weight paint mode, we can now select these bones, which is very, very handy. And you'll notice that bone 1 is all blue, which means it has no weight, or it's a value of 0. The same with bone group 2. But when we select bone group 3, you'll notice that it is this magenta pink color. And that is because that bone group doesn't exist. We'll come back to that in just a moment. To paint and add our weights here, I'm going to select my draw tool up here, and then we can choose our brush. I'm going to choose the add brush. You can see we're going to add a weight of 1 with a strength of 1, which means whatever I brush over is going to be full 100%. There we go, I've weighted that one. I'm going to select this bone here, it's all blue, so I'm going to weight the middle section here. I haven't done a good job there, but that's okay. Now when we select this one, I can actually just paint and it will create that group for me. You can see it's created that group over there. Let's check these groups and scrub my animation. Yep, I've done a terrible job, but in the next video, we'll go into more depth about the tools. But hopefully you saw how you can add weights with the brush, as well as even create a new vertex group that didn't even exist. So as you learned a moment ago, the only way to actually see the colors is in weight paint mode. So here you can see the weight colors of all our groups here. Now red means a value of 1 and blue means a value of 0. And the gradient is the values between those. Now the default behavior for Blender is that if a vertex is a weight of 0 or it is not a member of that group, it will default display as blue. And these are technically not the same thing, because one of them is actually part of the group, it just has a weight of 0, and the other is not actually in the group at all. If you wanted to change the way that it behaves, just go up here in the viewport overlays and you can choose the 0 weights down here. At the moment, the default is set to none. If we change this to active, you can see that the bottom part here has gone black, and that is because it is not a member of this vertex group up here. Whereas the blue is showing that it is a value of 0, but it is part of that group. So here you can see it fade off. So the black is not a member, black is not a member, and all the colors in between are a member. And the other option down here is to display all those. And it will display those end verts as blue because this option will only show you the vertex groups in black, which are a member of no groups at all. This one can be very handy to find those missing verts that you've missed in your weight painting. Although with these ones, it's personal preference. Do you like to see the black or do you not like to see the black? Personally, it really doesn't bother me, so I just leave it on the default settings there. Now some of the other settings here, you can show the weight contours, and this will show you how it actually flows from one group to the other. Actually, I'm on the wrong tool there. You can see how when we paint that, these little lines show you how they flow. Now to be honest, I don't use these all that often, but sometimes it can be helpful to point out when something isn't weighted correctly. So you want this to be straight, but it's kind of on a crooked there. So you can turn them on and go, oh, you know, my weight painting isn't that great. Most of the time I have that off because I find it visually confusing. Now the other option is to show wire. And now on this model, it's not actually working, but it's meant to display the wireframe over the top, just like this. It should display it like that. Now this is very handy to see when you're weight painting because you can actually see where those vertices are and you can get more accurate painting. So that show wireframe option is meant to display the wireframe in weight paint mode. However, it isn't quite working in this version of Blender that I've got. So a little workaround for that is to actually jump over to the Object Properties tab for the actual mesh and turn it on over there. Now the differences are that the wireframe will display in all modes rather than just in weight paint mode. And this can come in handy in certain circumstances as well. So let's have a quick look at this normalization thing. So here I've got a 4-bone armature. And you can see that each one of these bones, bone 1, 2, 3, and 4, are assigned 100% to our monkey head here. So what that means is you might think we can just move this and it would follow along with our bone 100%. And that is not the case. As you can see, I've just moved that and it's only following along a certain percentage of that. Now, why is that? That is because of normalization. Blender will always normalize the values before it applies the deformation. Let's jump into edit mode and have a look at these vertices. Now, normalization is a mathematical function, and basically what it does for each one of these groups, it will take that group and it will average it out over the sum of the others. So what that means is we have a value of 1 in this bone group, and that means 1 over the sum of all the groups, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is 1 over 4. So the true value, and not what is displayed, is actually 0.25 or 1/4. There's a couple of ways we can actually display these as normalized. I've already shown you this one here, but this will normalize these and you'll see that they'll all jump to 0.25. So there we go. But if we jump back into weight paint mode, you can see it's only normalized that one vert. So we need to copy that to all the verts, and you can see in weight paint mode, it's now that teal color, which is 0.25%. I'm just going to undo a little bit and then show you how to normalize in weight paint mode. So I've jumped back into weight paint mode, and you see up here, we actually have two normalize functions. We have just a plain normalize, and then we have normalize all. Now this one here is not what you want to do, because that will only normalize the current active group. What we want to do is normalize all the values. So this is the one that we want to choose here. Now when you first do it, the default settings aren't going to be correct. What we need to do is make sure that we uncheck this lock active, because if this is active, it's only going to normalize that one group and basically wipe out the weights on all the other groups. So we need to make sure that we uncheck that, and now that's looking much better. We also have these options in here, so we can decide whether we only want to run that operation on the selected bones, all of the deformed bones, or all the groups in the whole entire rig. Now for something like this, all the bones and the deformed bones are the same thing, but most of the time you only want to run it on the deformation bones. So that's the options that you want to choose there. So now let's have a look at all of our weights. You can see when we choose them, it's all displaying correctly. All right, let's have a look at one more example. Okay, in this example, I'm going to select all my verts here, and then I'm going to assign them to bone 1 over here, but I'm only going to do it at 10%. And let's click assign. So now you would think if we grab this control and we would move it around, all these verts will only move 10%. But as you can see, if we grab this one and move it around, it's moving 100%. And why is that? Well, we can go back here and have another look. So each vertex group is divided by the sum of all the vertex group. So 0.1 divided by 0.1 will actually give you a value of 1. So when I run the normalize function, this is going to change to 1. I can also copy that across to all of our other verts. So now if we jump into weight paint mode, you can see the true value is actually 1, or a color of red. So that is just one of the things that you need to know about the way that normalization works. If you only wanted it to follow this control, say 10%, then it would also need to be assigned to another group at 0.9 as well. So let me quickly do that. Let me just add a vertex group here and give it the same name as our bone 02. And then I'll assign all the weights to that at 0.9. Now I'll fix the other group as well because I normalized it. So I'll need to assign the verts to a value of 0.1. And now when we grab this one, you can see, yes, that is behaving the way that I expected. So the way that I think about this situation is that no vert can partially follow only one group. It will need another group to anchor it in place. Now all this normalization stuff might seem a little bit confusing when you first start out, and I guess it can be. So here's a really simple way of thinking about it. When you're weight painting for deformation, you always want to make sure that your values are normalized, because that is the true values that Blender is going to use. So when they're normalized, what you see is what you get. And remember to only normalize your deformed groups, because you don't want to break all the weighting on your other vertex groups, say your particle groups, for example. Now, hopefully that made sense, but don't worry, all this becomes second nature pretty quickly. I'll see you in the next video.